Like you mentioned, my name is Raj. I'm a therapist. I'm also a recovering addict. I got 8 years clean and sober on May 15th, and that's 8 years of real clean time. No Suboxone, no methadone, no sip of wine, no hit off of a joint. It's the gold standard of sobriety. And so what brought me into becoming a therapist and going to the next level is that, many of us in this room have lost someone we love and care about. And that's the common story. And so what's happened is that things have changed, and we're losing about, one person every day in each county to an overdose. And so America is about 5% of the world's population, and we consume 99% of the world's Vicodin. For 5% of the world's population, we consume 40% of the world's illegal drugs. For 5% of the world's population, we consume about 80% of the world's OxyContin. We don't have 80% of the world's pain. Is that making sense? Mm-hmm. And so what happens is, I had a close friend named Jerry, and he was married to Kimmy. And Jerry and Kimmy were married, and Jerry was working at the Chrysler stamping plant. And I got a phone call from Kimmy, and she says, Jerry died of an overdose. Now, I can't tell you that I'm surprised because I knew that Jerry was using. And I started kind of processing, then the grieving, denial. I'm starting to feel angry. And she goes, the story gets worse. I'm thinking, well, how the hell does the story get any worse? She goes, I'm pregnant. And I go, no. And she goes, and I'm doing heroin too. So this story got really worse. So I picked her up within 20 minutes, brought her to her first NA meeting, took her to all her medical appointments, got her detox while she was pregnant. It's a pretty rare thing to do. And so after the baby was born, after we got done burying Jerry, I go to the Godfather ceremony at St. Anastasia's Church in Troy. So it's me and Kimmy walking up to the front with the baby in her arms, and Kimmy's still wearing her wedding band, right? And so it's a Saturday morning, about 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm walking up there. My family's there. Jerry's family's there. Kimmy's family's there. And so the priest looks at Kimmy, looks at the wedding band, and goes, who is he? And I say, I'm the Godfather. And he goes, where's the father at? And she says, he can't be here. She's kind of looking down. And he says, grabbing the child out of her arms, I can't understand why the father of this Christian child isn't here on the most important day of this Christian child's life. And in that moment, Kimmy just lost it. Okay, broke down sobbing. She grabs this arm. My arm is soaking wet with her tears. I'm so angry. I want to put my hands on somebody, let them know how I feel about the situation. And I have what's called an epiphany, a sudden awareness. Addiction killed your friend. Now what are you going to do about it? Right? So my philosophy is when addiction smacks me, I smack them back even harder. When addiction kills somebody that I know, I try to get 10 people sober in their honor. That's how you win a war, with a 10-to-1 kill ratio. That being said, I decided to go to University of Michigan to grad school to become a therapist. So there I am sitting in class and I'm reading the preface of the book. Nobody does that, you know that, right? So I'm reading the preface of the book, and this girl looks over at me and she goes, why would you read that? It's not going to be on the test. I'm not trying to be mean here, but you're getting an education to get a job. I'm getting an education to become an addiction killer. And every bit of information that's in this book is going to help me kill addiction. And that was my philosophy. That's what drove me. I graduated from U of M with a 4.0. That wasn't on accident. That was on determination. So I began to work at a place called Eastwood Clinic as a volunteer. My success is your success. Remember, because the story ain't so pretty. You can ask Robin. You can ask Tom. 24 overdoses to the hospital, right? These doctors told me there's no way you're ever going to get sober. You're going to end up dead in a dumpster. And so, people, you hear that often enough, you might actually believe that stuff, right? At a certain point, I was like, maybe I'm never going to be sober. So as a side note, nobody was ever betting on me to win, but a few key people off into the side later on, never in the beginning. So with that being said, working at Eastwood Clinic, I'm doing volunteer work over there. I'm working on my MSW, and I'm handing out the classic Hazelton literature, right? And recovery today is acceptance of my life and its problems. So I'm handing this over to convicted murderers and people that are on armed robbery charges and drug diversion programs. One of the guys throws it back at me and goes, I'm not reading this shit. So I could have gone into therapist mode, like, you'll do what I say. You're a drug addict, and your best thinking got you a drug habit. Why won't you read it? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. Well, why won't you read it? Because it's got no pictures on it, and I got a reading disability, and it's kind of embarrassing. So I'm like, all right, how about if I write something and we go over it? Whenever I write something, it's going to have an image on it. He goes, yeah, I'll go over that with you. And so before you know it, I ended up writing a book on addiction called The Underground Recovery Book. Right? So I got a very difficult job. Imagine being me. I go into a high school or a college and make a presentation for 1 hour, right? And so people have seen thousands and thousands of hours of reality television, rap music videos, pro-alcohol media, right? And I pop up in there and I go, hey, everybody, drugs and alcohol are bad and sobriety is really good. You gotta listen to me, right? That's a hell of a job. And so I gotta have all kinds of angles on that. So what I've done, you gotta promote, right? So promotion is very important. So we have some t-shirts made up, and so I began thinking, okay, we gotta have something cool, like Fortune Favors the Bold. And at the very end, I'm going to play my video for the song called Fortune Favors the Bold. That took me 4 years to write, because by the way, it's hard to make Fortune Favors the Bold work in a chorus, okay? It's a difficult thing to do, but I did it. So, we got a t-shirt, Fortune Favors the Bold, we got some drug-free fists on it, looks pretty cool, right? Imagine if my t-shirt said, I can't get high, I'm in drug court. You want to wear that t-shirt to school? You want to wear it around the house? No, we got to sell recovery, we're not trying to make it look bad. But see, it's going to get more complicated. Why not kind of tie it into what we're all about? Detroit hustles harder. That means what you want it to mean. That can mean spiritually hustles harder, academically hustles harder, gets more people sober, hustles harder. But here's where parents get upset. So I got a 15-year-old kid comes into my office and give me a lecture on cannabis and how it's going to change the world, and I should smoke weed and join him, right? And at a certain point, we're not getting along too well, and he goes, you understand something, Raj? You know that Bob Marley's my hero, and he smoked pot every single day, and I'm a guitar player too, and I'm gonna smoke pot every day and be like Bob Marley. And that's why I say, you weren't ever gonna be like fucking Bob Marley, because when you smoke pot, you can't even go to school, you can't even do your homework, you can't even do your chores. When Bob Marley smoked marijuana, he never missed a concert, and his mom never came to my office with tears in her eyes. That's where I'm going with this. By the way, so we give a kid a t-shirt, and I convince him, try 30 days of sobriety, and do a few other techniques as well. Then he shows the t-shirt to his mom and goes, look, Mom, what his shirt has on the back of it. Mom rolls her eyes, oh my God, who I brought my son to? What the hell's going on, right? I'm like, yeah, well, let's see what happens in 90 days. So 90 days later, he's wearing this shirt to my office, and I say, hey, Mom, your son has 90 days sober now. And she goes, yeah. And I go, how do you feel about that t-shirt now? And she goes, Raj, I love that t-shirt. This shit is complicated. We're trying to sell recovery, and it's a difficult job to do. Is that helpful to understand? And so with that being said, I want to mention that, with Jerry passing away, I was far beyond driven. And we talk about, what is recovery and what is addiction. So people get confused about this issue, but it truly is very, very simple. I'm going to explain how this works. According to the American Medical Association, for anything to be a disease, it must have symptoms and it must be treatable. That's really simple. It must have symptoms and it must be treatable. So when a person's got diabetes, you can have diabetes because you're predisposed to that genetically. But the genetics loads the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. And so what happens is your lifestyle, these types of things play a role in your diabetes, right? And so when a person's got diabetes, I show them, hey, here's your blood work, you got diabetes. And they say, wow, I have high blood sugar, treatable with insulin. I show somebody their DAS test, drug abuse screening test. I go, hey sir, you have a drug problem. The guy says what to me? The test is wrong. Because addiction is the only disease that tells someone they don't have a disease. And that's remarkable. So anyone ever gets stupid with you, the idea is very simple. Addiction is a disease because it's got symptoms and it's treatable. That's how it works, and it's very clear. And we talk about, well, what is recovery? It's a fancy word. I'm in recovery, or I'm clean and sober. And that sounds really nice, but recovery is an active change in attitudes, ideas, and behaviors. That's deep, isn't it? Like Yoda stuff. Recovery is an active change in attitudes, ideas, and behaviors. If I was a drunken horse thief and I stopped drinking, what would I be? Sober horse thief. But I still don't want you dating my sister. You follow what I'm saying? Well, I want some more improvement here. So we talk about the change in attitude, the change in behaviors. And that's more complicated, more difficult to do. And so recovery is an active change in attitudes, ideas, and behaviors, which brings us to 50 Cent, the famous rapper, right? And his name means what? 50 Cent means change. Every recovering person's favorite rapper is about change. You change your furniture, you change your phone numbers, you change your bedroom around, you get rid of all those bad phone numbers, all those bad people on your Facebook. Is that helpful? And on top of that, we talk about, well, why do people get high? Why do people, get addiction? Some people try drugs and walk away and never destroy their lives. And that's why addiction is complicated. Addiction is a biopsychosocial, legal, financial, spiritual disease undergirded by damage and dysfunction to the reward feedback loop of the brain. That's deep, isn't it? It damages the reward feedback loop of the brain. The most valuable real estate in the world, your mind, has been hijacked. And that's how addiction works. It's the inability to get high successfully. When an addict gets high, they get physical problems. When an addict gets high, they have anxiety and depression. When an addict gets high, law enforcement keeps showing up. When an addict gets high, they ain't got no money. When an addict gets high, they begin to break their spiritual values and their morals over a period of time. And so the flu is very easy to treat. It only has physical symptoms. Addiction is very difficult to treat because it has physical, mental, psychological, legal, financial, and even spiritual symptoms all going on simultaneously. But the main symptom of addiction is the inability to get high successfully. If your mom comes into my office and she's got tears in her eyes, you're not using drugs properly. Is that too intense, or is that making sense? No. All right. So we talk about, the different myths, and we talk about the 4 Ds. Has anyone ever heard of denial? You might have heard about this, right? So addicts have the 4 Ds. They deny, delay, distract, and divide. If I come to you guys and say, hey, my name is Raj and I have a drug problem, you're going to say what to me? Hey, Raj, get help and stop using drugs. So if I don't want to stop using drugs, I can never ever tell you that I have a drug problem. I can have depression, I can have anxiety, I can have all kinds of other issues that are going on. I can be bipolar, or have borderline personality disorder, but as soon as I cop to being a drug addict, as soon as I cop to being an alcoholic, you're going to expect me to change. And if I don't want to change, I can never ever admit that. This goes really deep. I did an intervention on a guy. Remember, I don't turn down any crying moms for interventions. Some of my clients have their own private jet airplanes, and they're local celebrities. Other clients are on food stamps. I take a lot of pride in that. So one of my wealthier clients, he came to me and we did an intervention on him. He was driving out to Brighton Hospital and he was like, hemming and hawing, still denying he had a drug problem. So he tells his father, Dad, I'm not a drug addict. And Dad goes, well, son, why do you still steal $80,000 out of our business checking account? He goes, Dad, because I'm gay. He goes, son, I don't understand. He goes, well, these people found out that I'm gay, and they told me that if I didn't give them money, they were going to tell you about it. He goes, all right, son, that's really interesting, but I have a problem with this. You're married and have 2 children. And he goes, and if you are gay, how come you showed up positive for opiates in your drug test? And he goes, well, see, Dad, that's part of the thing. They forced me to take drugs while I was gay, because if I didn't take drugs, they were going to tell you that I was gay. Like, what? No kidding. And he calls me on the phone. I go, just keep driving to Brighton. I'll meet you guys up there. Right? And so by the time we get up there, we have everybody showing up. And like, what's this new thing? It's called denial. It's called distraction. He's trying to avoid getting help because he wants to be anything but a drug addict. Because if he's gay, he doesn't have to stop using drugs. Right? If he's got depression, he doesn't have to stop using drugs. No one wants to cop to that deeper plea. So what about this thing called distraction? Why would a person who has an addiction problem want to distract from that problem? We see it in an intervention all the time. A person walks into an intervention, they admit they have a problem at some point, maybe an hour into it. Then they say, yeah, but my dad smokes weed. My mom, she beat me when I was little. And so why is someone pointing over here and over there? What's the goal behind that? Because remember, if they can get you focused on something else, they can walk out of the intervention and not go to rehab at all. Right? What about delay? This is a good one too. You guys are absolutely right. I do have a drug problem and it's really, really bad. Definitely going to go to rehab. I'll be there Saturday, 9 o'clock in the morning. I'll be there in the parking lot. I promise you I'll be there, right? I got to break up with my girlfriend. I mean, that's really easy to do. Just go on Facebook and just change your status. No. I got to go see her to break up properly. I'm a very responsible person. No. We're going to go to rehab. We'll handle the girlfriend thing, right? So they're going to keep delaying getting help. Because remember, it's scary to get help. It takes a great deal of courage to get sober. That's how we talk about fortune favors the bold. Not trying to be mean. Not trying to be mean at all. Respect for everybody. But you know what? If you're getting high, if you're abusing drugs and alcohol, intoxication is the vocation of the frightened and scared. People that are afraid of reality will hide themselves in intoxicants and not want to grow up. They have Peter Pan syndrome, right? I don't want to have adult roles, adult responsibilities, adult relationships, adult feelings. I hide myself in intoxicants. To get sober, you have to be courageous. You got to walk through those feelings, walk through those problems, and not use drugs and alcohol to take the edge off. Is that helpful to understand? So we talk about, this whole thing with distraction, but what about the one called divide? Why do addicts tend to break families up into factions? Mom says it's not that bad, dad demands that he goes to inpatient treatment, right? Sister says that he's really, really bad, and the older brother says no, he needs to go to just NA meetings. Why do we see that fracturing of the family? What's the goal behind that?
Divide and conquer.
Right, divide and conquer, you're absolutely right. So, if you're in active addiction, the last thing you want is everyone on the same page saying, you have a drug problem, go get help. So they're gonna look for the weakest link in the chain, they're gonna break the families up. Here's what I hate the most. Oftentimes when someone dies of a drug overdose, the ultimate insult that addiction does after the fact is breaking up those families and causing a divorce. It's like, it's even bad enough that addiction killed your kid, but now it walks in and breaks up your marriage because it says, well, you should have done this and you should have done that. And before you know it, mom and dad are pointing fingers at each other and addictions out in the parking lot laughing. So we talk about deny, delay, distract, and divide. And those are the 4 Ds of addiction. And it's helpful to understand it that way because when you deal with somebody, you can go, oh, he's engaged in denial. Oh, he's trying to distract about this issue. Oh, he's trying to delay getting help. Oh, he's trying to divide up the family. When you're able to identify those mechanisms, you have power over them. Is that helpful to understand? And so I want to talk about the big myth of being ready to be sober. Anyone have heard? They got to reach their bottom. You must have heard that before, right? They got to reach their bottom. Well, here's the problem. 25% of people that tried heroin just one time become physically addicted. That's powerful. 25% of people that try heroin one time become physically addicted. Not all drugs are created equal. So when a person's become addicted to heroin, do we have the time to sit around and gather around and say, okay, son or daughter, you're putting a needle in your arm, but we're going to wait around until you have your epiphany. And all of a sudden realize that that's wrong. See, that's a luxury that we don't have. And so when I do an intervention, the whole idea behind interventions, I can make your bottom happen as long as your family and friends are going to help me. I can make your bottom happen today. I can make your using so miserable you're going to want to go to rehab. I can make your using so miserable you're going to want to say, okay, I've had enough. And so we don't play fair with addiction. I'm going to give you 2 little dirty tricks. For example, let's say you love and care about somebody and they're doing heroin. You happen to be a mom. You're like, hey, my son's shooting heroin and I don't really like that, so my job is to make his using as miserable as possible. So you call local police department on the non-emergency line and say, hi, I'm a loving, caring mom that belongs to Fan, and my son shoots heroin and he doesn't answer his phone in about 10 hours. Could you do a courtesy safety check for us? Of course we can, ma'am. You're knocking on the door. By the way, do heroin users like the police knocking on their door on a daily basis? Does that kind of ruin the buzz, right? I have other clients, we hire a private detective that drives around in an unmarked police car. And they've got a little GPS under the car. It's not really legal, but they do that anyway. And they follow this kid around to all his dope spots. How does a dope man feel about selling to a guy who's being trailed by an undercover police car? Is that good? Is that good business model for that guy? What ends up happening to that sale? Right? Remember, when we're trying to help somebody out, our job is to make their using as miserable as possible and their ability to stay sober as easy as possible. And we don't have the luxury of waiting for a bottom to happen for somebody. That luxury is gone. The bottom oftentimes nowadays is actually death because so many people are dying from this disease. Heroin's really unique in the way that the dosage to get high off of heroin varies from about 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams. But the lethal dosage is about 50 milligrams. So one of the reasons why hospitals prefer not to use heroin, even in Europe, is that little gap between the overdose amount and the therapeutic amount is very, very narrow. Morphine is much more forgiving. Dilaudid is much more forgiving. Methadone is much more forgiving. And so this brings us into, well, why is everybody dying now? And so I want to point out that you guys watch the news and hear about a guy named El Chapo. El Chapo, who's that guy?
He's a good
Is he a good guy or bad guy? Bad guy. The first billionaire drug dealer ever was Pablo Escobar. You know who that guy is? Pablo Escobar, right? He was the first billionaire drug dealer ever, and he came from Medellin. He was a very powerful guy. He even ran for, I think, Senate or something like that. He blew up their equivalent of the Supreme Court when he got really mad about extradition. So the Colombians came in the 80s and they shot at Miami really, really bad and drew a lot of attention to themselves, and the Escobar thing kind of fizzled out, right? So this El Chapo guy is in charge of the Sinaloa drug cartel. You might have heard of the Sinaloa drug cartel. Well, here's the problem with these guys. They specialize in manufacturing fentanyl, and they add fentanyl to their heroin. Remember, Afghanistan is the world's largest heroin producer, opium producer, but most of their heroin and opium goes to Eastern Europe, and also Turkey and Iran and Iraq. It doesn't really come to America. Only 10% of America's heroin comes from Afghanistan, and about 80% of our heroin comes from the drug cartels. And the Sinaloa drug cartel specializes in adding fentanyl to the heroin. So what's bad about that for the average heroin user? No tolerance to fentanyl. They've been shooting heroin for a period of time, but this batch has fentanyl in it. And fentanyl is 10 times stronger per milligram than heroin. And all of a sudden the person ends up dead. Now, people say, well, that's a horrible business model. They're killing their customers. Why would they do that? Because it doesn't matter. Has anybody ever heard of a drug dealer with a whole bunch of heroin that couldn't sell it? You see my point? There's people lining up to buy more of this stuff. And that's what's so horrible and tragic about it. As soon as someone dies of an overdose of fentanyl-laced heroin, there's a bunch of kids trying to get that stuff to get a little bit higher. Because when they're in the drug world, they aren't thinking rationally. When you're putting a needle in your arm, you're not feeling really good about yourself. You're not thinking about 10 months from now, 10 years from now, right? What am I going to do with my life? What's my 5-year plan? So when they began the war on drugs in '72, what happened? The war on drugs became a war on drug addicts, drug users, right? And so who are those people? Anybody have an idea about, remember, anybody nowadays can become a drug addict. The old days you had to come from a really bad family. But nowadays you can come from a really good family and become a heroin addict. The tables have turned. We'll talk about that later, but 1972, the war on drugs began under President Nixon, right? So what's happened to the price of heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine adjusted for inflation since 1972? Has it gone up? It's gone down. You can buy heroin in Detroit for about $5. $10 to $5 a pack of heroin. You can, in 1985, heroin in Detroit was about $13, $15 a pack. And that was only about 6% pure. The heroin now is about 40% pure. How do I compete with 40% pure heroin? They show in studies that the less pure the drug is, the more likely a person is to go get help. The more pure the drug is, less likely people are going to rehab. There's actually a ratio with that. That's amazing. And so the Sinaloa drug cartel, with weapons given to them from the ATF and the Fast and the Furious program, now dominates Mexico. And proof of that domination is that they brought their biggest person, their major kingpin, out of a prison in a mile-long tunnel. Nobody knows where he's at. You guys find that very interesting? So what's that telling us about Mexico? Mexico isn't a country. It's a narco state. It's like Colombia was a narco state in the 80s. Right now, the cartels are so powerful, they could topple the entire government at any given time if they wanted to. The cartels are in control. And these are 3rd and 4th generation drug dealers and drug importers, and this is part of their culture. And so we've created the demand, but by the way, how did demand happen? How did America become this place drawing on all this heroin? Was it a Mexican plan? The Mexicans sit down behind a computer and plan together and say, we're going to get all the Americans on heroin. How did this whole thing really go down? Can we be honest with each other? Do I have permission with this audience to tell the truth and not get in trouble? Yes or no? I'm asking.
Yes.
It's called Farmageddon. For the first time in American history in 2014, more people died from prescription drug overdoses than all illegal drugs combined. I'll say it again. For the first time in American history, remember, Florida was the first to have that happen as a state. For the first time in American history in 2014, more people had died from prescription drug overdoses than all illegal drugs combined. And where do those drugs come from? Doctors. So, not to be mean, but some of the worst drug dealers in our communities have medical degrees. Now follow the logic. If you go down to any kind of place to buy some drugs, right? You meet a guy selling drugs, he'll say, hey, buy my drugs, don't die, come back and buy some more. In some ways, it's a very honest relationship. He doesn't give a shit about you. But you go into a doctor's office, right? He's got a medical degree on the wall, right? He drives and he's part of the good society, and he's sworn in oath. Remember, drug dealers don't swear an oath, but every doctor does to do no harm. And so you see the guy like, I got this pain in my knee. Can I have some Vicodin, please? He's like, absolutely. But they failed to mention all the other problems that go along with that, right? So what's happened is that 80% of the people that become heroin addicts began their heroin addiction with prescription drug abuse, and primarily Vicodin and Oxycontin. If you got the flow chart handout, it shows you exactly that flow chart into addiction. So what happened with this drug called Oxycontin? Anybody ever hear about this drug called Oxycontin? Oh, you guys know a magazine called Forbes? The richest people in the world, right? Guess who's in the Forbes magazine just this year? Who made it? The family that privately owns Purdue Pharma, who manufactures Oxycontin. Behind every great fortune is a great tragedy and crime. So basically, the people that own Purdue Pharma are now multi-billionaires. So how'd that happen? What's special about Oxycontin? When they got approval to manufacture it and sell it, they lied. They lied about its addictive properties. They lied and said it could not be abused. And some of the people that came in there actually said it was non-addictive. So they go in and see all these doctors, they're called pharma reps, right? And the pharma reps go in there and they convince the doctors, oh, all your patients are being under-medicated. All your patients are in pain. It is a moral crisis that we have so many people in pain about getting pain treated, right? They cited this one study, this anecdotal study of 20 people that were given morphine that never became morphine addicts and said, see, it's not very addictive. And so Oxycontin came out and they said it could not be abused, right? Because it was time release. And so how do people begin to abuse the time release Oxycontin? Crushing it. How complicated is that, by the way? I can teach a 2-year-old how to defeat the defense mechanism in that Oxycontin, right? It's very simple to do. And so, at some point, families, people complain, my kids are dying. They used to have a pill called the 160 milligram Oxycontin pill. And if you crushed it and snorted it, you'd be dead. They stopped making that, right? So now, you have all these people beginning to complain. They say, hey, Oxycontin, Purdue Pharma, could you please do something about your pill so everybody's not dying? They're like, yeah, we're going to look into that. And they go, by the way, for the last 50 years, other pain medications have this thing that's called a gelling component. And what it does is if you add some water to that pill, it turns into a jelly, and you can't draw it up in a syringe. You put some water onto that pill, or you try to snort it, it turns into a jelly and doesn't go up your nose. They're like, yeah, we're going to look into that. And so how long would it take before Purdue Pharma changed their formula? 14 years. 14 years. And when they finally changed their formula, and we'll get this date right, it was 2010, okay? And what happened to Oxycontin sales that first month? 2010, and you can ask Blue Cross and Blue Shield, because they did the stats on this. There was a 40% decrease in Oxycontin prescriptions in 1 month. Why? Why would 40% less people want Oxycontin that month? Because they were all abusing it, which means that 40% of all people that were getting Oxycontin through Blue Cross and Blue Shield were abusing it or selling it. And that's remarkable, right? And so thousands of people died, and Purdue Pharma went into court. And they pled guilty. They said, we did this, we lied, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, but here's the thing. Nobody can go to jail. Nobody can even do a perk walk. Nobody can even go to jail for even a minute. And our U.S. Department of Justice said, okay, what are you going to give us? They go, $600 million. It's true. $600 million, right? And so I took that money. By the way, what was the Oxycontin profit that year? 3.1 billion. I'm not good at math. What's 3.1 billion minus 600 million? That's still a pretty good deal? Right? One-time loss of 600 million? So it's never going to happen again, right? No one's ever going to do that again, right? Right? What about the banks that launder the money? I mean, the Sinaloa drug cartels. Remember, the Mexican sociologist says, you guys are really silly. As long as the money keeps going to Mexico, they're going to keep bringing drugs into your country, right? And so where's that money going through? Is it going through all in cash, or are they moving it through many of these banks? So banks called HSBC Bank. You ever hear of HSBC Bank? They're very, very big, right? They went into federal court and they said, here's the thing. We're very, very sorry. We laundered money for the Sinaloa drug cartel. In fact, we even had a branch that was dedicated to laundering money for them. They said, by the way, we did something a little bit worse than that. So who would upset you more than the Sinaloa drug cartel as far as our enemy as America? Who's a really bad enemy? How about the Taliban and Al-Qaeda? HSBC Bank said, we laundered money for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and we're really, really sorry about that. And by the way, nobody can go to jail. Nobody can do a perk walk at all whatsoever. Now, I'm not done, but if you get caught with heroin in Oakland or Macomb or Wayne County, can you say to the police officer, here's the deal. I'm a really big fucking deal, and you guys can't really arrest me because I'm a really important guy. And so I'll give you a fine or a fee, and we'll call it a day, right? And the cop would say what to you guys? So are there two tiers of justice? So HSBC Bank, they said we're very, very sorry, and they gave $1.92 billion, the biggest fine ever paid in American history. And what was their profit that year? $22.6 billion. Are they ever going to do that again?
Yeah.
Until we deal with the macro level, until we prevent these drugs from coming in huge quantities, until we address the issue of a systemic failure, because addiction is a systemic failure. It's a failure in organizations and institutions that allow drugs to come in huge quantities. And these kids aren't standing a chance. And they're going to bring me up on the issues of, use of the internet and the Silk Road. I've had clients that are able to order whatever they wanted. A 15-year-old kid, using that special currency, and they're able to transfer money back and forth. And the FedEx guy is bringing him every drug that he ever wanted in his life: heroin, cocaine, Oxycontin, MDMA. It's all coming through the internet, and all coming from China. And the whole game has been changed. Is that making sense? So we got to begin to address that and deal with that. And so, talking about Pharmageddon, 80% of heroin addicts began their addiction after becoming addicted to prescription pills. And when Oxycontin changed their formula in 2010, by the way, that year, heroin use went up 200%. And who met that demand? The Mexican cartels, right? And so, for the first time in American history, we're dealing with a new paradigm where we don't have to come from a really bad family. Remember, addiction is based on, adverse childhood experiences. The persons that become addicts and alcoholics have had really, really bad things happen to them in their childhoods. In general, 80% of all female IV drug users have extensive sexual abuse histories. Trust me, I deal with this in the stories on a daily basis, right? And so when really, really bad things happen to you, you're in a lot of emotional pain. Then someone gives you a painkiller, and then how do you feel? A lot better. And then they say don't do that every day because you're going to have a habit. If you don't have any resources, no psychologist, no medical insurance, what's going to happen? You're going to become drug dependent. I'm going to prove a point about how we fail people on a systemic level. So you guys ever watch a TV show, Intervention? So 80% of the people that are on that show that go to rehab stay sober for 1 year. Are you impressed? I know I'm impressed. 80% of people that are on that show that go to rehab stay sober for 1 year. Why is that? What's different about those people? Well, people begin to investigate that, right? They know something very interesting. If you're on the show, you get 30 days to 90 days of inpatient treatment paid for. That's incredible. 30 days, 90 days of inpatient treatment paid for by the show. The family gets free therapy and free counseling. The moms, the dads, the sisters. And by the way, after you complete inpatient therapy, you go on to sober living that's paid for 6 months to a year. You can ask Tom about what he's done, changing the world, making a better place with his sober living facility. And so when you go there and you have insurance, you go to Brighton Hospital. I worked at Brighton Hospital for 3.5 years, right? And you go to Brighton Hospital and people come to see me and they say, rehab doesn't work. I've been there 3 times. I go, yeah, how many times you been there? 3 times. But each time, how long were you there for? 7 days. 7 times 3, 21 days. That's not enough days. Imagine if you had cancer and your insurance company told you, yeah, you got really, really bad cancer. In fact, it's lethal. You can die. You say, well, how are you going to treat this? Here's the problem. Your insurance only covers 7 days of cancer treatment. And how people respond to that? They'd be calling their lawyer. They'd be suing the companies. They'd be out there with picket signs, right? But when your son or daughter has an addiction problem, and they go to Maple Grove, or they go to Brighton Hospital, they go to Sacred Heart, they go, all we cover is 7 days. All we cover is 10 days. All we cover is 14 days. And those people that go in there are sincere and earnest, but they aren't being given enough treatment. So my very wealthy clients, I do an intervention on them. They call Betty Ford Center, right? We call Betty Ford Center. Hi, Betty Ford Center. We're going to get this kid into rehab. They say, sure. It's 30 days minimum, $1,000 a day. And the dad says, I'm running a check for about $90,000. I want him there for 90 days. So the kid goes to Betty Ford for 90 days, goes to sober living. He stays sober. Is he better than somebody else? What's different?
He got money.
He got more treatment. He had more money. And so we set people up to fail in this system. Even when they leave rehab, they don't go to sober living. They're not prepared to live a sober life. 10 days, 14 days, 21 days of inpatient treatment for heroin addiction, cocaine addiction, MDMA addiction, that's an insult. And I apologize to everybody in this room that's been failed by the system. It's not you. Is that helpful to understand that? We gotta begin to change that. There needs to be, our insurances cover a reasonable amount of state so people can be successful. I'm not saying that it's a conspiracy, but I will say this, if you're an insurance company, you've got a bunch of addicts on your insurance rolls, and if they die of overdoses, doesn't that save you a lot of money? Doesn't it? Or am I mean for saying that? Right? We have to be honest with each other. In America, and I love this country, in America, when it comes to killing people and locking people up, we borrow billions of dollars from China. When it comes to helping people, educating people, and treating people, and healing people, we say we ain't got no money. And that's not true. Because we spent $8 billion just building roads and schools in Afghanistan. And I can't get a guy into rehab. I've had 2 clients die waiting to get treatment. That's not right, and it has to change. So I want to finish with this, if you don't mind. I'm proud to join with you today in this demonstration of love, support, and defiance. We are no longer going to be pushed around by addiction or the people, organizations that support and promote it. We are no longer going to be quiet. We will be heard. Who is sick and tired of being sick and tired? Who has had enough of the stigma, the pain, and the shame, the embarrassment and humiliation of having to act as a son or a daughter, the pain of losing someone you love to an overdose? We make a pledge that we shall always march ahead. We will not and cannot be defeated because we are on the right side of history. We cannot turn back and surrender to this disease. We are spiritual warriors. And allow me to paraphrase and make this memorable for everybody in this room. Ever heard the speech, I Have a Dream?
Yeah.
Well, here we go. And so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day there will be no stigma with the disease of addiction, that a mother who says, my son is an addict, will get the same support and same response that a mom gets when she says, my son has cancer. I have a dream that one day it will be just as easy to get into rehab as it is to buy a $5 pack of dope in Detroit. I have a dream that one day the response of a judge to a kid with a drug problem will be rehab, therapy, and sober living. No longer will jail and prison be the place for housing addicts and alcoholics. I have a dream that Narcan and Vivitrol and help and hope will be available to everyone who wants and needs it. That we will judge our court system not on their ability to punish, but on their ability to rehabilitate. I have a dream that the children that are growing up today will not have prescription drugs filling their public schools and falling on top of their heads. The children growing up today will not have parents locked away for petty drug crimes. The children growing up today will not even be able to access heroin if they wanted it. And further, to those organizations that support and promote addiction, I have a dream. The doctors and the AMA will no longer be drug dealers with medical degrees, that they will abide by their own oath to do no harm. That the banks launder the billions of dollars for the drug cartels will see their CEOs and executives marched off to jail, just like the drug users. The millions of dollars confiscated from drug dealers will no longer be used to go to the police and the DEA, but the money that's being confiscated from drug dealers will be used to pay for the damage done by those drug dealers who will pay for treatment and therapy. We cannot arrest our way out of a drug problem. And so once again, I have a dream. There will be no more for-profit prisons, and that big pharma will no longer be able to lie and push opiates on the people with no consequences. That when someone is addicted by a doctor, they will have their rehab paid for by the drug company who created the problem. And for the thousands of people caught up in the war on drugs and the hopeless addicts that are suffering in obscurity, I have a dream that you will no longer live in shame and in stigma, that you will be embraced and all your petty drug felonies removed from your records so you can live and work where you choose. I have a dream that I live for, that one day no mother will ever know the pain of addiction. No wife or husband will ever know the pain of losing someone to the system, that no child will ever cry again at the overdose funeral of their mom or their dad. I have a dream that addiction will be beaten, broken, and battered, and run out of every single city, town, and hamlet, and state, and that we will be able to live our lives free from the scourge, free from the pain, and free to live and thrive to reach our full potential, drug-free. Thank you for your time.